Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We met
Thank you.
just recently, and I mean, you are a little wealth of information and just a whole bunch of things that you do. So I want
Oh,
you
thank you.
to introduce yourself with everything that the foundation of what you do.
Okay. Basically, I use hypnosis. I use a light trance. When I have used a deep trance with my clients, many times they will feel the physical part of their death, and we do not need to feel that when we're having a regression. It's bringing people back to the root of whatever their issues are. It can be fears, phobias, anxiety, depression, weight issues, relationships. So we can understand why we're here. We can understand what our lessons are, what our purpose is. I will, my philosophy is that we life script before we come here. That will set up a blueprint so that we will choose our traumas and difficulties in our life so that we can learn the lessons that we're here to learn. And we do have free will, so we can change that life script at any given time. But we are here to learn many lessons, and one dominant lesson that will follow us around through life. Usually, it's the pattern that keeps showing up in our life until we get that lesson. They're not easy. In my book, I went back to read through my lessons about 3 years after I published the book, and each chapter are different chapters for why people came to see me. But almost 50% of those who came to me, their main lesson was self love. That's a really big one here, and a really important one here, and a really difficult one to learn, funny enough. People say, well, I do yoga and meditate, and that's a wonderful thing. That's self care. And yes, that is part of self love. But the really big piece of the self love piece, and I really am very much on top of that self love piece because it's about self respect. It's not allowing anyone to disrespect you in any way. It's about when someone disrespects you or says something unkind to you, you want to take your power back and just say, I love myself too much to allow you to treat me this way. And that way you do take your power back, and telling them when they're kind and compassionate, you can have a relationship. And not only have you taken your power back, but you're teaching the other person that their actions are inappropriate. And they may not have known that, so they're learning a lesson too. Speaking our voice is very important in the self respect realm and,
Absolutely.
and feeling worthy. So,
So, how did you get into doing past life regressions? I mean, how did that happen? So, you're a hypnotherapist.
yeah, well, that came later. It came right in the beginning, but it's kind of a cliche way of sliding into this whole work. Back when my son was 4 years old, we were watching TV. He fell asleep. So as I went through the channels, Shirley MacLaine's movie came up on Out on a Limb. And when I saw that and she explained about her past lives that came up when she did energy work, it was like someone reached in and grabbed me and said, this is what you have to do now. And I was totally not expecting that. I have a master's in special ed and counseling, a bachelor's in English. I never thought that I would be going into hypnosis or past life regression. I did have a near death experience at 8 years old, and I think that did kind of set me on the path already. Um, but I didn't really understand that until Shirley's movie came up, and went down to Maryland and I learned Ericksonian hypnotherapy. When I talked to him about doing past life therapy, he was furious with me, the instructor, and said, absolutely don't use this work for that. And Erickson would be so angry with you. So I don't think Erickson would have been so angry with me, but here, 37 years later, I still do this work. I just I'm never surprised, but always amazed at the healing that happens so quickly with everybody. And it's amazing and very deep work. It changes our DNA. Um, and there's a lot of information that comes from the other side with this of how we incarnate, why we, come here, what it is we have to work on. And again, what is our life purpose? What have we come here to do?
Right. It's amazing that we can actually change our DNA by doing this. We change our
Yes.
minds, we change our DNA. It
Yes.
can be an extremely powerful modality for healing.
Absolutely.
So in all of the work that you've done, what are some of the cases that you've worked with that have been, like, wow, they've really stood out for you?
Well, the universe gave me my first 5 that were probably the most difficult of all the clients I've ever had. So it was either you swim or you're going to sink. And the very first one was a woman who called for her daughter who had anorexia, and she was dying from her anorexia. She said they had tried everything. They went to hospitals, therapists, medication, nutritionists, everything.
I'm going to jump in for a second
Sure.
on this one. And I want you guys to understand about anorexia. I had this girl, I literally had to refer her to a rehab because when you are in the throes of anorexia, I mean, this mother brought her daughter to me, and I think it's like the only client I could not just make any headway, because when you are so malnourished,
Yes.
the gut is your first brain. And it is like this girl was just clicked out. She just was not present in her body. And she was just like in a daze. And I suggested for her to go to a rehab that I knew about. And I'm pretty sure she got the help that she needed.
Okay.
But when you're working with somebody with anorexia, I mean, you've got to find that miracle, because it is a very, very big deal.
Well, you can imagine when she said that I was her last hope, how that made me feel when she was one of my first 5 clients
Wow.
that I ever had. So I said, I will do my best. I just prayed that it would work. And basically, I took her back to the root of her anorexia. I do a history intake before we start, and she told me that she kept using the word she wanted to disappear, that anytime anyone would focus on her, that she just wanted to disappear or just fall through a hole in the ground. And that she was 19 when she came to me, and she had dropped out of college. She tried to go the first year, but whenever the teacher focused on her, she just couldn't do it. So she said even going to a restaurant, if the waiter asked her what she wanted and focused on her, she felt the same.
Wow.
It was, just paralyzing. And so we went back to the root of it, and she went back to a lifetime in the 1930s, I believe it was, where her father was a big director and would always ask her as a child to entertain all his friends, watch her tap dance and watch her do this and sing them a song. And she hated it, and she was so upset. And she went off to boarding school as she got older, and came back and decided she would go into the theater. And she started taking acting lessons and met her husband at the time there. And he wasn't her husband yet, but met him there, and they did get married, and she became a success. She actually came in the regression when she was coming down a staircase in a beautiful gown at a party, and she said she felt like a goddess coming down the steps. So I told her she could hold on to that feeling of being that goddess, that she still has the same soul and it can still feel that feeling. And apparently she and her husband would fight all the time. And she went over to the balcony with him to get in another argument, and he hit her. She fell off the balcony and died in that lifetime. And so there it was, if anybody focuses on me, I'm going to die. So she tried to disappear so people wouldn't focus on her.
Wow.
And she was killing herself that way. So when she came out, she was so excited that it was like wasn't like best actress, maybe best supporting actress at the time or whatever. This party was for her. And she just couldn't stop thinking about the image that she felt that she was that person and that she looked so beautiful and all that. And it gave her a whole different image of herself. So she actually channeled the light when we went to the other side to get messages. And they said that the light said, or God, or whatever source you'd like to refer to this as, that she needed to go and put her attentions to someone else, and that she needed to become a teacher, and that if she would put her attentions onto the children, she would take that attention away from herself. So it was just like this amazing clearing that, her mom called me because she wanted to come see me. She said, if you help her, I'll definitely be there to see you. And a few weeks later, she said she re-enrolled in school. She's doing great. It was just that one regression.
Wow.
And I know that it happened that way so that the universe can tell me, or told me that this stuff really works.
That's amazing.
That was incredible. Yeah, incredible first one.
I'm going to just jump in for a quick second.
Sure.
So when you're looking at that, there's so many things that you can get out of a past life regression. So a lot of times people are like, well, why do I do whatever? And they're focused a lot on the challenge of it, or what, sometimes it's like they died a certain way, so they have a continual phobia of whatever.
Right.
But I love that she had that moment of just really feeling her power.
Yes.
And that's huge, because sometimes in this lifetime, that's one of the things that I work with.
Right.
Is like having people understand how powerful we are.
Yes.
And so when you're able to go back into another lifetime and feel that and bring it into now, wow,
exactly.
That's huge.
Exactly.
I love that. And by the way, just really quick, I see that you guys have questions and comments. If you have any questions of our beautiful guest here, just put it in the text if you're on Facebook Live. Okay. So you were going to say more and I interrupted.
No, I love when that happens. Many times we don't feel that in a past life either, and we may bring that feeling of unworthiness or sadness or fears or whatever with us here to have to release in this lifetime as well. And we may choose a drama in this lifetime that was very similar to a drama we had in a past lifetime. And that's one of the things people sometimes feel like they're making it up, because a lot of information comes into your conscious mind is present with your subconscious mind when I do this work with you. So it does sometimes, it's hard to know where it's coming from. But at the end of a lifetime, I'll always tell you to, think about the life. And if you were to make it up, why that story? And most of us have pretty mundane stories. There aren't a lot of very exciting ones like the one she had, but that one had to, come through for its purpose, as well. And her mother was a whole other story. I think I'll save that one. She was a very interesting woman. So that was one, and so that was a big thing to me, to be able to get rid of a physical malady or illness. And I've had a few of those migraine headaches. I had a young woman, actually, which is a friend of ours, my son's friend's sister-in-law, who had terrible migraine. She had just given birth and she could not be with this baby.
Yeah.
So when I talked to her mother-in-law asked me if I could work with her at her other son's wedding. So I said, sure. We went to the room and she told me that during her menses, when she first got it at 13 years old, that's when they had started these migraine headaches, but she would get them once a month. And when she had given birth, she said it was like full blown. She could not get out of bed. It was like constant, such terrible, terrible pain. So once again, we went to the root of it under the hypnosis. And she went back to a lifetime in the 1800s where she lived on a farm with her family. Her mother died when she was about 8 years old in that lifetime. And she helped her father, continue on the farm. And when she became 13, her father raped her and she became pregnant. And she, within this shock of understanding she was pregnant from her father, carrying the shame that she had of what happened, she walked out on a cobblestone street and a horse and carriage hit her. She fell, hit her head on the cobblestone, and died carrying the shame of being pregnant and the rape of her father. When did it happen? When she was 13 years old. She started getting the migraines at 13 here, and the baby was full blown because she was pregnant, just had this baby.
Wow.
And so we did the release of all of that. And I do that with breath work and visualization. And no more migraines.
Wow.
It was that quick, Some of them are very dramatic like that, where you have like one session and boom, you're clear. But sometimes there's more than one lifetime that contributes to an issue or a physical illness. So I always ask at the end, how many lifetimes do you need to release from to clear that issue? And then we have an understanding of what that can be. So
when something like that happens, people don't know about this. And by the way, Marcy, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in just a minute. When you're having an experience like that, I think sometimes people might be a little afraid of, I don't want to re-experience being run over by a horse and buggy and dying like that. How do you mitigate that? How does it
So basically, we're watching this as a third person. We don't look out from those eyes, so we're not experiencing as many senses that we would if we were in the body. And if somebody for some reason does experience it within the body, I just tell them to rise above the body and they can watch it from above. I just had that experience with a young man. It takes them out of that situation where they can just watch it and be more objective about seeing what's going on than experiencing. I want them to experience the emotional part because we want to release that. That's the thing we don't want to carry with us, because there are emotional, energetic blocks that cause these illnesses and cause these things that we finally need to get rid of. So once we can release those negative energetic blocks, then it clears that and the DNA goes back to normal and we can move forward.
That's an interesting thing you put it like that, because it's in this lifetime as well.
Yes.
When people first start working with me, a lot of them have pushed those emotions over there. Yeah. They dissociate, and I'm just going to forget about them. I don't want to deal with those emotions,
right.
Not realizing those emotions are running the show.
Exactly.
So when they come in and they're working with me or they're working with you, yes. We help them to be the observer of the emotions more yes. than the person who is the kid in the back seat. You get right. to be the adult and deal with the kid in the back seat. But, we've all been trained on a level how not to deal with the emotions. Let's just go have a drink.
Right.
Let's go do some drugs. Let's go watch a show on TV and right. just numb out. Whatever all those different versions of it are. Exactly. So when you're able to be with those emotions in a way that is processing them out, that's everything. So yeah. processing it out in a prior lifetime and in this lifetime, yes. there you go. Yes. There you have it.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
And I do something if, my client will allow me. Of course, we have all these things from our past life that we bring forward. And if we release them, it really helps to clear it out. But we also have karma in this lifetime. And we've had experiences in this lifetime that add to that energetic. So once we pull that out, we still have the emotions from this lifetime to deal with too. So what I like to do with my clients then, if, they will continue and go forward, is to bring them back to their early, let's say it's depression, to their earliest memory of being depressed. Sometimes it brings them into utero and they can start telling me about what their mother is saying, that she can't do this, she doesn't want to have the baby, and it's making her really sad. And so I role play with her and I pretend I'm the mother and I have her as the baby, because she had no voice then, to tell the mother how does that make you feel? Tell her that it's making you really sad to hear that your mother doesn't want you, you know. And then they'll repeat that. And then we're going to release that sadness of that baby too at that time. And as the mother, I try to be more positive and tell her, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you could hear what I was saying. I just was really confused then. And, you know, can you forgive me? Because we want to get to that place of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And usually they can.
Yeah.
So, and we do it for every moment going through our history here in this life where we felt that something that caused that depression or was part of it. And we do that, you know, until we get to now.
I've actually worked with a fair amount of people who have had, whether it's in utero or an experience of abandonment by a mother. And there is a key thing that they don't understand, because as a baby, as a child, you take all these things personal. My mother didn't want me.
Right.
And there's a part of it where I let them know it's not that they didn't want you. They didn't know you.
Right.
You know, they didn't want the responsibility of a baby or a child,
Right.
and it had nothing to do with you.
Right.
And so when you can depersonalize it like that and make it, you know, a different perception, then it can change everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to say Marcy had a question back here. She's asking, can tarot cards tell you what I was in a past life? I don't know if you do tarot.
I don't do tarot. I know some people can tell you, who are psychic, what your past lives were. It's very different experiencing it yourself versus through a psychic or through cards or anything else, because you're going through the act and feeling the emotions and everything, you know, all the other parts of it. But that I don't know. I don't know about.
Well,
tarot.
Marcy, I can tell you, Nick, my husband, Nick Newmont, does tarot. He is a psychic medium, channel, all of that. So you're saying here, you're asking because the card you got scared the hell out of you, pun intended. Nick can help with those kind of things. Look him up on newmontcenter.net. You'll see him there. And then she's also saying, I must have been run over by a truck or something in my past life. I have rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia. Then she says, does past life regression change the future of learning our soul's lessons if we go back and change something like pain? So if you go back and learn, can it help something like the fibromyalgia and the arthritis?
Well, not only learn, but release. I mean, it's the release part of the emotion that you went through back then. If, let's say, you were riding a horse and cart and you fell off and the horse stepped on your leg and you couldn't walk again on that leg and were miserable the rest of your life, and you left depressed because you couldn't work out in the fields anymore, you might come here with, you know, a bad leg again. It may be arthritis. It could be fibromyalgia. It could just be bad knees, whatever it be. You know, but if we go back and release that depression that centered around your accident, it can heal here. Absolutely. And I did find that arthritis is very tied into the emotion of shame. So just something to think about, as anything happened in your lifetime, in this lifetime, it's making you feel shame in any way.
She's saying she actually got stepped on by a horse when she was 5. Yeah. You know, there's so many things that contribute to all of this. And just that alone can be a big part of it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So there's an interesting book, Marcy. It's called Metaphysical Anatomy. And in there, you can find all this stuff, the emotions, the mental, that is underneath the physical of what's going on. So you can check that out. But also, it's so funny that we're talking about the legs and all of this, because I went to Saundra and had a past life regression, and that was part of my story. I was on a farm, lived on a farm, and I had this whole thing that happened with my legs. And in this lifetime, I've definitely had a lot of issues with my legs. So Like,
How are they feeling now?
really good. I've been
Good.
doing really good.
Good.
And Marcy, there's a part of it too where you might want to look into doing something like hyaluronic acid that can really help with arthritis kind of things. And now Gloria is saying, I've been going through physical issues in the last 5 years, determined to get through. How does the past lives create these issues later in life? Yet prior to the past lives, I was in perfect health. Oh, prior to the past 5. Are you saying 5 years you were in perfect health? So, wait, let me read that again. I've been going through physical issues in these last 5 years, determined to get through. How does the past lives create these issues later in life?
Oh, okay.
Yet
That's a good
prior to
question.
the past 5 lives, I was in perfect. Last 5, I was in perfect health.
Okay, very good question. We have triggers in this lifetime that will bring us back to those memories. And your age is a trigger. So if you had an incident that happened to make you ill at the same age of, let's say you were 25 in a past life, and you became ill with pneumonia or something, that might have kept you in bed for a long time or what have you. It could have been, any illnesses or, that, made you sick for a while. When you're 25 in this life, it could trigger a response in your body to work on what happened at that time. Again, what emotion was tied into the illness back in the past life, releasing that can definitely help your illness in this life.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. The age is definitely a trigger. It could be smelling something, that can trigger you back to a past life. It could be being in a certain place. Many people talk about deja vu, that they feel like they've been there before. Most likely they've been there before, in a past life. But places and things and foods even, can trigger us back to certain times in our past lives.
People can trigger us.
And people, absolutely, people.
So she's saying, and Marcy is saying, that's my entire spine and hips. I also grew up on a farm. Thank you for sharing your experiences and gifts with this knowledge! Exclamation mark. And then Gloria said, I had breast cancer in 2003 to 2006, which I knew you then. Good grief, we've known each other a long time. No cancer for 17 years now. Doctor just found another lump. Oh, well, you and I are going to talk. So again, when you're looking at something like that, it can be in this lifetime a trigger, and it also
Yes.
can be something from past lives as well.
Right. And usually when it comes to the breast, I myself had breast cancer. There's a lot that has to do with nurturing and children, and because that's our nurturing place. So, something in this life, if a child goes off to college, it could trigger something for us of loss and abandonment or what have you, and we want to still nurture that child, so we can get triggered and have something show up.
Right. So what is another one of your cases? I'm all kinds of fascinated.
Okay, so that was physical and depression. Okay, addiction. That's a big one.
It's huge.
There's so many things today that we are addicted to more than ever. But whatever it is that we're addicted to, if we have an addicted personality in this life, almost always we had an addiction in a past life. They could be very different addictions, but it's part of that personality that needs to be worked on when we come here. So we'll come here again with this addiction to try to alleviate it. We have a lot of things today that can help with addictions. So, okay, let's see. Well, this one kind of is an addiction and also a fear. I had a man who was quite large come to me, whose wife was ready to divorce him because he used to hoard food under his bed at night. And he loved to eat, and he would eat whenever he could, finished always everything on his plate. And he just couldn't get enough food. And his wife, like I said, she was ready to leave him. She couldn't handle the food under the bed anymore. And he certainly had an addiction to food, but there was something deeper to it. So we went to the root of his addiction I don't even think we called it addiction. We just went to the root of his needing to have food around him at all times. And he went back to a Holocaust lifetime where he had no food. And he had to hide the little pieces of bread under his mattress, or people would steal it from him. And that's where the bed thing came from, hiding the food under the bed. And, when he got to see that and, where it came from, and we released it and all that. Part of the release is also bringing the memories from the subconscious to your conscious mind. Once it's in your conscious mind, it can release very quickly as well. But I did help him with the release, and he was much better. He didn't need to hoard it under the bed anymore because he knew he could have food whenever he wanted to, that it wasn't going to be taken away from him. And he agreed to go on a diet, and go into therapy with his wife and try to, heal his relationship with her. So something like that, can be an addiction. People who were addicted to pills in this lifetime could have been addicted to alcohol in another lifetime, and I had somebody I was just working with, this young man who came to live actually with my sister. He had CP in this lifetime, and he wanted to know why he came here with the CP. And his father was a doctor in this life. And
what is CP for people?
Oh, I'm sorry, cerebral palsy.
Okay.
His father in this life was an alcoholic and a doctor. And when he found out his child had cerebral palsy, he would beat him up. And he didn't want to have a child with cerebral palsy. And it was really the alcohol that, was doing this. And the mother also is an alcoholic, and she wasn't there to save him. So finally, when he was old enough to leave the family situation, he'd moved in with my sister, whose kids went off to college, and she was helping him. And there was an instant connection that they made. So it's also interesting how there are no coincidences. When we are with people who we're with, it's usually a reason for it. And so when he asked me, could he do this with me to see why he came in with CP, I said, sure. And he wanted my sister there so she could witness it too. And she, growing up, always had psoriasis very badly. And so when he went back to the root of his cerebral palsy, it took him back to a lifetime also, I think in the 1700s, where they lived in a little log cabin. My sister was his biological mother in that lifetime, which happens often. And his father was the same father. And in that lifetime, he was a raging alcoholic. And he came home one night and hit my sister in that lifetime, in the past life. She fell, hit her head on the hearth, and passed out, and her dress had caught fire. And the little boy jumped on the father to hit him, like, look what you've done to my mommy. And he was about 8 years old. He threw him down on the floor and stomped on his legs until they were broken, and left him and my sister to die in the fire. And in that lifetime, his father damaged him and his legs, and he agreed to come back as a doctor to try to heal him in this lifetime, but he didn't get the lesson, and he was abusive in this lifetime too.
Wow.
And so when I worked with this fellow, he was using crutches and had a pretty bad gait when he was walking. When we finished, it didn't take away his bad gait, but he didn't need his crutches anymore,
Wow.
which was a big to do. My sister, who just witnessed the regression, her psoriasis started getting better, and she didn't even have the regression. So hearing this story, it brought that story to her conscious mind, and her body started healing too. Whenever we have skin issues or diseases, many times we were in a fire, that probably caused it in a past life. So, it doesn't mean that it'll totally, if these issues are here in this life, they'll totally go away. Sometimes it's just a little bit of healing, sometimes it's a lot of healing. So we don't know until we get in there, how much. But it was, so he understood now with his father, and also he fulfilled his lesson. He walked away. He could walk away from his father in this life.
And that father's going to be stuck with that shit.
Right. He's got to still work on his, we talk about forgiveness, to me, one of the best answers for forgiveness is not condoning the act that someone does to you, but being able to release them from having to play that role for you any longer, and releasing yourself from having to be the victim any longer. And that clears your karma with them. They still have their karma they have to work on, but they don't have to come back with you and do it again.
And I think that's an important part to really get. It's about your whatever that is.
Right.
And I've told a countless amount of people, there's a quote that I love. It's to forgive is to set a prisoner free, and to understand that prisoner is you. When you're letting go of somebody else's stuff, so many people want to hold on to that anger because, it's like, how dare you do that to me?
Right.
And when you're holding on to the anger, that creates in the body, and the other person has no idea. And so you're holding on to it like, I'm going to show you I'm angry with you. And it's like, that's nothing. But when you're letting it go, and you let go of that connection with the other person, and you are now learning the lesson in this lifetime, there you go.
Yes.
And I had a moment with my mother. There's past life regressions, and then there's like moments. My friend channeled my mother, and my mother is in wherever, and she said that she's looking back over her life.
Yes.
And she's doing like a past life review.
Yes.
And in that past life review, this is my friend Lisa, and I know some of you have heard this before. In that past life review, Lisa's telling me, as my mother, she said, I wish I had spent more time with you and your brother instead of those cats. So in her review, she's realizing she really wasn't present with us. She wasn't, being a mom. And it was really cool because I was able to say to her in that moment, it's okay. I am who I am now because of all of that. So there's all these ways to release the energy around it. And with every one of them, it boils down to love, right?
Yes. Love is everything. Absolutely. And it's self-love first.
Hello, Nicholas. Everybody say hi. Nick. So I'll see you when we're done, sweetheart. So I love these stories. I mean, I think people can really relate. It's like amazing. So the person, her psoriasis gets better. He's not walking with his crutches
anymore.
Jeez.
I know. And they're dramatic. And, there's some people who will go in and have a session, and they come out, they might feel just a little better, so many things can affect it. If there's more than one lifetime that's affecting it, the more we go back, the better they feel. But sometimes it's not a total healing either, but just feeling better is better. And the other part too, with who we choose, we do choose we do travel with the same soul groups, and we do choose our parents. And some people would say, I never would have chosen those parents, but we do. And, we do because we need to, they're our core where we start learning from. And if they're not emotionally available to us, most likely we're supposed to learn the self-love piece. But also I say, if we chose them, they had to agree to it. And how many of us would say, oh, I'll be Cindy's abuser so that she could learn how to love herself, We have to thank them for being those great teachers for us, to agree to do that. I'd rather be the victim than to have to, in my mind, to have to abuse somebody.
Right.
But we've all been everything. We've all been the abuser. We've all been the victim.
It's funny. We had a session here with Nick, and he was channeling Merlin, and Alexander was channeling Golden Arrow. And at the end of the day, I asked a question. And it had to do with how many children are having such a moment right now, and all of the the stuff. I don't need to go into the details of
Sure.
it. And I had said to Golden Arrow, it's like, I'm finding myself, I see this, and then I have to go back to holding it in prayer, and it's getting revealed, and these children are getting the help that they need. But then I
Yeah.
go back to it, and I'm on this seesaw, and it was just painful. You know, I just, it hurts. And so
Yes.
they said to me, and you'll love this, they said, Audrey, a lot of people look at that and they don't have the same reaction that you have. You have that reaction because in this lifetime, you have been the victim. And I was like, "Ah," you know, it's like, it hit me like a ton of
Sure,
bricks.
of
And then
course.
she said, or they said, we all make a pact, as it were.
Right.
I will be the victim for you. I will be the perpetrator. And
Right.
that's what they said. And they
Yes.
said, so when you are looking at this in this lifetime, it gives you another perception of
Right.
things. And so again, you bring it back to love.
Right.
And I'll love you enough to be the perpetrator so that in
Exactly.
this lifetime we work through this.
Right.
And I think that's one of the important things
Yes.
in this lifetime, because we all have this information now.
Yes.
I mean, in many other lifetimes, or
We
and
didn't.
even in our past, in our histories, we haven't been able to have
Access.
this
Yes.
kind of conversation.
Right.
So when you're able to be in this moment and you're looking at it with that new perception and you're enveloping it in love and light and
Yes.
understanding and compassion, doesn't that just change everything?
It does. It really does. And it's so hard sometimes, I know, when someone who has been a victim here, it could be from sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, whatever the abuse is. It's a hard thing to share with them, but I do it because I feel like if they know this just wasn't a random act of God, that there was a real reason for it. You know, most people who've been abused in this lifetime have been abused in other lifetimes.
Yeah.
And couldn't speak up for themselves, because if they did, they would have been put to death. So they agreed to come back in this lifetime to go through it again, so they could finally use their voice to speak up for themselves and say, you can't do this to me anymore.
Right.
And that can look a lot of different ways, you know, to do that. If you can't voice it, you can write a letter to them, you could scream it from a mountaintop, whatever works. But
I've recommended both.
Right.
With my clients who have had
help.
those kind of moments, it's like one way or
Absolutely.
another,
Right.
we're going to own that word.
Right.
So much of life, it's about owning your word in
Yes.
whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. And it's
Yes.
wildly important.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Marcy really wants to get what she wants to have a past life regression with you. So, oops, wait, go back here. Oh, wait, I'm looking at your comments over here. You do via Zoom. You can
yes, I can Zoom
regress
anywhere.
with anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll give you her contact information at the end.
Thank you.
So,
Is it-
what were you going to
No, I
say?
was just going to say, you know, are there other questions? Would you like other stories? I've got a lot of stories.
Your stories are incredible.
Well, they are incredible.
You know, we were talking a little bit about this.
Yes.
And I wanted you to share this little bit of a story
Yes.
too. And if you guys have any questions of her about regression, past life regression, or any of that, put it in your comments on Facebook Live, and that way we can ask her. So you were telling me
great.
about this. I'd love for you to
Yes.
share this with everybody.
Before I moved out here, I lived in New York, and I started, co-founded a group called the Katona Study Group for Integrative Medicine. Everybody's invited. There's still 26 years into this wonderful group, and they do it by Zoom now, so you can certainly join in. And basically have people come in who or some type of healers, or have incredible stories, or sometimes mediums. You know, we have all different kinds of people who come. And we just had this incredible man who had an incredible story. He was a doctor. He had a son who he had triplets, actually, and this was the third. That's another interesting story, is the one I had with twins. But anyway, he had triplets. And one of the triplets was born well, I don't think he was even born brain damaged, but when I guess coming out, he became brain damaged. And he said he was always not taunting them, but always making them have to answer to him in some way or form. And I wanted to share some of the things. He ended up, when he was 21 or 22, he was out on a hiking trip with some group and had a seizure and had fallen face into this stream, and had became hypothermic. And they could barely resuscitate him. I think his body temperature was like 43 or something when they brought him into the hospital. And the father was across the country with his wife, where they lived. And so he was horrified when, of course, a phone call came through that their son was being resuscitated, and they needed to come. And so they did make it there in time before he passed. And when he passed, they both had this. Oh no, I'm sorry, they didn't make it there. But when he passed, they both had the same image of their son. They said it was like an oblong shape with their son's face on the top. There were no limbs or anything attached to it, with a big smile on his face. And he said for himself, being a doctor and a scientist, that this, he never would have believed it, thought he was delusional or what have you. But when his wife experienced the exact same thing in the same room, they knew that it was real, what they had experienced, that they actually saw their son's soul leave.
Wow.
And it wasn't the end of the story, because the son then wanted to talk to them about what it was like being brain damaged, what it was like, why he did all that he did, why he came in and agreed to come that way. And I wanted to share some of the notes that came from the son to the father. And he would always have these synchronistic things happen with the son, with balloons and all kinds of things. But one of them was, he said that his son said that in his opposition are our greatest teachings, for they let you see the other side of things and of ourselves. So, it's one of these are all things you have to really sit and think about each one. There are, enough that I'd like to share with you, but he has a book out that's called Already Here.
Just that one alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are like, I don't want those hard moments, and they just do everything. Just don't have this hard moment. That's where we get it all. That's where we grow. That's where we level up. That's where we gain some of the sloughing off of the crap, and we be that lighter version of us. So when there's a hard moment that comes and there's that challenge, it's like, you don't have to embrace it, but you can, be with it and know on the other side of this, there I am,
Exactly. And he said that heaven is not a destination, it's a state of being, which I thought was very beautiful.
Yeah.
Also, the only important thing to learn in this life is love, which we're trying desperately to learn. Also, to be present and engage with each thing you do and with each person you meet. We're so plugged in with so many things, and there's so much going on all the time. It's being in that moment, really engage with the person. I feel that so deeply.
Can I chime in here for
Sure,
a second?
Go ahead.
That is one of those things that people who are in relationships, they come in and it's like, he's always on the phone or she's doing this. And it's like, they don't connect because everybody's like somewhere else.
Yes.
That is a very common thing right now.
Yes.
Very common.
Thich Nhat Hanh, I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. He had a story, which I always loved, of how a child comes into the room and the mother is cooking and she's thinking about what she did yesterday and what she's doing tomorrow. And the child just walks right by her because she doesn't feel her presence. Do we not do that so often of, what do we have to do later? And, oh my gosh, I should have done this yesterday. And it's pretty amazing. Also, when you work from your intuition, it all happens at once. So I'm not quite sure how he meant that, but it's so important to work from your intuition, from that intuitive place versus our heads, listen more to the intuition than our brains, although we have to do both, of course.
But you have to be in your intuition in the present moment.
In the present moment, exactly, exactly.
You have to be in that choice point. That's where God flows through.
That's right.
That's the intuition. So
That's
if you're
right.
thinking about the past or you're being in the past, whatever, there's not your intuition. If you're worried about the future, stressed about the future, whatever, there's
right.
not your intuition.
That's right. Absolutely. And when you're open to the universe, it will send you signs. You must watch and listen for them, and more will come, especially synchronicities. And he had a whole thing with yellow balloons. You have to read his book. It's really good. By the way, it was called Already Here. Those born with handicaps, brain damage, and afflictions are filled with innocence and unconditional love.
Yeah.
And what great teachers they are for us in that way. And he said, God is the act of loving others. He needs the universe as the universe needs him.
Yeah.
Which is also so beautiful. And we need to separate in order to come together. So
we could expand on that too.
Right.
But I want to, before our time is up, I need to hear about those twins now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You said that about the twins, and I was like, what's that story?
That was one of my favorites. I love when things happen, and it's such a new experience for me because I've learned so much from my clients. They've been my greatest teachers. So I had a little boy who was 10 years old who came to me who had ADHD, and he would come in, and he was a twin. And he would sit down with his mother, and he'd sit with his arms like this all the time. And I'd say, what's the matter? And he'd say, my sister karate chops me all the time, and she's so mean to me, and she calls me all these terrible names, and she's always kicking me. And the mother is like shaking her head, yep, this is true. So I said, I'm sorry, and I said, but, we'll go to the root of, I like to get the children's language before I take them there because I want to make sure that their understanding of what it is. So I don't say, do you want to go to the root of your ADHD? I'll ask him, what do you think's going on? He says, well, I have a hard time sitting still in class, and, he'll give me his. So I'd say, okay, let's go to the root of why you're having a hard time sitting in class. So he went back to these about 6 lifetimes with the ADD, and it kept getting better. Things were getting better for him, his mother was saying. And they were going to be moving down to Washington, D.C. And so the very last time that we were to be together, again, he's sitting there with the arms crossed and still moping about his sister. And I finally said, would you like to find out why you came here with your twin sister? Why she's so angry at you? And the mother is like this, and he's like that, and I said, okay. So we went back to the lifetime that brought him here with his sister, and why she's so angry with him. So it turned out that he had a heart condition as a young boy, and he was always at the doctor's, always getting stuck with needles. And as he grew up, and it was, I think, back in the 1960s, so it wasn't that long ago, he ended up getting a heart transplant. And the person's heart he got was in a motorcycle accident, and who was the heart from his twin sister. So he ended up dying. It didn't take. And his sister was so angry at him when we went to Spirit Side for not keeping her heart alive. And that's why she came to, part of her heart was in him. Part of that soul was part of her heart. Oh, wow. So she came here as his twin, and an angry twin at that. And so we found out why she was so angry. And they were going to share that with her. That's one of the other lovely parts of this work, is that even if someone hasn't gone through the regression themselves, if you share the regression with them, if they were in the regression, it could help them release it too.
Right.
So, which is nice.
That's just fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating? I know. I love that one. And she contacted me when they got down to Maryland, where they moved to. And she said she didn't talk about her daughter, but she talked about that he has no fear of needles. I didn't know he had fear of needles, but he had no fear of needles anymore after that, because he found out where he kept getting stuck in that lifetime, because of his heart condition. So it took away his needle fear.
There have been some documented, like really amazing stories. Like there's a kid, and I know you know the story, I'm sure you know the story, and he had he was born and he was remembering his whole past lifetime as like a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And there's all these stories also of
children are very open.
Children are very open. It's fascinating to talk with little people. I love talking with little people.
Yeah.
They're just, amazing.
Yes.
And there's all these documented cases of people, and again, with a heart transplant as well, where the person takes on some of the memories that are in the heart.
Exactly.
Your heart has a little brain in it. We were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
And when your heart has that little brain, and then you move that heart to another person, it's like there's been documented cases of them remembering things that are locked and loaded in the heart.
Yes.
So last night, I'm looking at the time. Just going to say really quick, when you're doing any of this, when you're doing the past life regression, when you're doing any of this, all of it is designed to release from your heart these things that we burden ourselves with. Those hard feelings, that anger, the resentment, the guilt, the shame, the remorse, all of that stuff. So in this lifetime, when you keep letting these things go and you're understanding them and you're gaining that wisdom and gaining that resilience and literally dumping the trunk, that's the heart and the car analogy, and you're letting these things go, then you are lightening your being to not only be in this lifetime, but for your next timeline. All the things that we are creating at all times. So before the last minute runs out, please share with them. Again, she has this amazing book. It's Footsteps Through the Sands of Time. It's on my Facebook page on the earlier post. And it's really, just the introduction is really great. And all your stories and all the amazing things you have in there. So how can they reach you?
You can either get me on my website, which is Saundra, Saundra, Cindy, Cindy, Blum, BLUM.com, or my phone number is 914-420-9349. And my email is Cindy, Cindy, pastlife@gmail.com.
So thank you very, very much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
And I look forward, I've sent her a client or two. I'm looking forward to hearing about their sessions, because sometimes when I have a client, it's like for instance, relationships, sometimes I'm going to go a second over. Relationships, sometimes it's like I'm looking at, sometimes when I'm working with couples, it's like this could be something else. And so this one particular situation, we're going to see if it is something else. And I'll let you know next week on this conscious mind tripping. I'll give a little update of what that looks like with you.
Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure being here. And Audrey in the center is amazing. So
thank you. Yes. So I will see you guys all here next week. And Nick will be on Mainstream Metaphysics on Tuesday night. So I love you all very much. Thank you again and again. And I'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.